and it is the legislation that has the map which you see before you, in addition to the attachments for the street and the actual code regulations that will regulate the development project. And Z 1853 is the sign ordinance that will also is a companion to this legislation, and it is proposing that the signage in this area be the same as signage in the C2 district, which requires monument signs. First, an SPI is a special public interest district. There are approximately 19 special public interest districts here in the city, even though we go up to SPI 22. As time has gone on, some of them have been collapsed into each other, or others have been totally wiped out. But we do have approximately 19 SPIs currently in the code. An SPI is a zoning regulation. It is just like an R4, an R5, a C1, or a C2. It is actually a zoning category, and it has all of the amenities as another conventional zoning category. SPI 2 was the original name given to the Fort McPherson development when the project started several years ago. And when the Development Authority came to us and said we're ready to move forward, we reestablished SPI 2, and that is what the Fort McPherson SPI will be called. The rezoning, the current zoning on the property is I1 light industrial, and that is the historical zoning designation that was on the property when it existed as a fort here in the city. Currently, the map that you see before you is how the SPI is divided up into sub-areas, and this is what Brian went over before. This is also in your handout, and it is the 4th page from the rear, so if you want to get a closer view.
Yeah, I forgot I failed to introduce our partner from MARTA in the 5th area.
Greg Floyd is here. He is our partner from MARTA, and when the Development Authority initially came to us, they said that MARTA was interested. MARTA was interested, and we have included the Fort McPherson MARTA station in the SPI. And that would beg the question why we didn't include Oakland City. Oakland City has its own TOD that it will be going through, and so it was not appropriate to bring this into that area into this SPI. However, it has significant importance with this because it will be sandwiched between 2 MARTA stations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about parking. So if you turn the page, how an SPI is regulated is through the, I think you went too far. What's an SAP should be next? Well, let me talk to you a little bit, before I go into the use, let me talk to you a little bit about what an SAP is. An SAP is a special administrative permit. It is what is issued to the developer when he comes into the office before he can move to the building permit phase. So it is required for him or her to submit that application for the vertical building, and it is staff in the office who will be going through what the Development Authority calls their design book and the regulations to make sure that what is being submitted is in line with that design book and the regulations, okay? So the permitted uses are the uses that the Development Authority came to the city and said these are the uses that the community has spoken, has said they wanted to see in the LCI, and we have now made those into regulations. When you're looking at the table, it is divided by sub-areas because all the uses that are allowed in the entire SPI are not allowed in every sub-area. Areas where there are allowed, you will see P's as permitted. Areas where they're not allowed, you will see X's because it is prohibited. Where you see the symbol SUP, the use is allowed, however, it requires an SUP application in order for that use to occur on that property. And SUP stands for Special Use Permit. It is an allowable use in the district, however, you do have to ask permission to allow that use to occur. And I'm sure all of you have gone through the MPU system and you've seen special use permits for daycare centers and personal care homes and hotels and the like. So this is the same type of process. It's allowed via SUP. Now, when you're looking at the table of uses at the city, we do categories or groupings. So you heard Ryan talk about movie theaters. You won't see movie theater listed. You'll see a commercial recreation. You heard talk about restaurants being allowed. You won't see restaurants, you'll see eating and drinking establishments. And we in the Office of Zoning and Development are responsible for interpretation, and we do groupings because if you become too specific, you leave some things out. So we try to be general and broad so that we can cover a lot of things. So if you want to do a food hall is just a retail space. But if you did food hall, it would just be specific to food hall, and maybe that would leave out some other types of uses. So the locations for bed and breakfast inn are allowed in the Campbellton district and the Heritage district. They are not allowed in the Market District. They're expressly prohibited, as well as in the Western District and the Fort McPherson TOD District. I am on page 7 of 17. It's where the special use permit table begins.
So when are we gonna take questions? I mean, no, I'm asking, should we wait until the very end?
Yes, ma'am. I'm almost through. It's only a couple more topics. Go ahead. So now we're at the development controls table, and I have to say, I'm sorry, but when we were originally going through this process, Alger and I were talking about height. Brian, don't look like that. We were talking about height, but I remember the conversation going back and forth about height, and Alger reminded me that they were not doing really tall buildings, and that's how we came to the conclusion of the 150, 75, and 75 feet for some of the buildings. So please excuse me. The development controls tables controls the development site. As an example, in the Market District, could you go back one slide? In the Market District, if a property is about 2 acres, then it's allowed to have about 280,000 square feet on the property. And in conjunction with that, they are also required to have an open space requirement. So 15% of that site also will be required to have open space, grasses, areas for people to recreate. So now, overall open space. If you look at any of our zoning categories, you will see very detailed calculations about how we calculate open space. And this was an area of contention between the development team and the city, because the city requires a significant amount of open space. And the way the development plan is written, it accounts for development space, however, it's not very specific at this time. So we came to a conclusion where we will require a certain amount, and that'll be 1.5 million square feet of open space accounted for over the entire 145 acres. That is what they are committed to and required to do. So each time they come in with a project, we will be checking off how much open space is accounted for and how much more they have to get to their required amount. Now, we do know that they're going to go above that amount because there's a significant amount of parks and other public spaces that are accounted for in the development site. But for city staff to be comfortable with these regulations, we needed to have a number. In addition to that, anyone who has a development site, they're required to maintain at least 15% open space on that site. Now, with regard to parking, overall, any of the updates that you've seen us do here recently, whether it's been to a specific category or to the zoning ordinance update, we in the city are moving toward parking maximums and reducing parking overall, and that is a departmental initiative. In Fort McPherson, when Commissioner King was reviewing this plan, he said we need to stick to that policy, and they are going to provide 2 parking decks that will have public parking. In addition to that, this development is also promoting shared parking. In addition to that, this development has 2 MARTA stations that are in close proximity to the development, so we're not accounting for a lot of parking. We're only going to account for parking on the maximum level, and so as each development project comes in, we'll be accounting for parking as the uses come in, but we will not be doing a lot of surface parking or a lot of parking overall, because it's just not the way that this development site would operate. The historic buildings are buildings that were existing on site. In the beginning of your legislation packet, you will see where all of the historic properties are listed. At the rear of the package, you will see all of the requirements for historic properties that Mr. Doug Young included in this legislation. It allows for historic properties to be, the historic properties will be reviewed by SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Office. We will not have any review of City of Atlanta, but we do have regulations regulations that allow them to remove properties, demolish properties, and restore properties or put new properties in the historic areas.
All right. Questions? I have a few, but I'll let y'all do them first. No. Go ahead.
Can you explain your last statement?
The historic property statement?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So the properties on the base, if there were properties that we were going to review, we as the city, we would require a certain amount of review for the exterior. These properties, however, are under the purview of the State Historic Preservation Office, and that happened when the Development Authority was created. And so they have the review and we do not.
Ruben.
Thank you. While looking through the permitted uses, I noticed sales and repair establishments. Could you please elaborate, if possible, on what repair establishments includes? Is it automotive or?
No, sir. If it was automotive, it would specifically say automotive repair. This is for small repair, bike repair, shop repair, appliance repair. It is not auto related at all.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, Michael and then James.
I'm asking about the permitted use and structures. What do you mean when you say park for higher parking structures? Would that
What
be
page
basically?
you on, Michael?
Eight.
Page 8. Would that be basically 80% of the parking is paid parking?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is that it, Michael?
Yeah, that was.
So,
James.
two questions. Can you define open space?
So open space is all of the area that is around the building that is either grass or trees or shrubs. It can also be hardscaping, it could be benches, it could be balconies, although in this case we have expressly excluded balconies from this district. It is any area where a person can either sit or stand.
Great, thank you. Second question, 150 feet, that's roughly 10 stories?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
10.
That was kind of my question, because I would say that the Forscom building is probably the bar. Okay, we can go. No, what I would say is the Forscom building is probably like the bar of the height of the area of pretty much almost anything in Southwest Atlanta. So 150 feet, would that be higher than? Wow,
Yeah.
that might be twice as high. Okay.
I mean, that's the bar now, but that's in the new
Yeah.
standard.
Okay.
So, I mean, the question
it's
is-
the MARTA stations where you really want to bring some additional density. So there's gonna be something, I mean, USAR building is taller than Forscom, and there's gonna be
Yeah, sure.
something a little taller than that as you get closer to the MARTA station, but you see the limit is 75 feet in all the rest of the site. That's not the market and the.
Could you explain that in stories as opposed to feet? How many
10 stories.
Sure, 10, a height, the floor to ceiling is either 10 feet or 13 feet. And generally, if you're doing a 10-foot ceiling to height, that's about 10 stories. If you're gonna do 100 feet.
That's right. Thank you.
Any other questions in terms of that? I got a few. So bed and breakfast regulations, we don't have any in the city. But I know if you go back and where it talks about the bed and breakfast, talk to me about how do we define that? And what regulations are we gonna put around the bed and breakfast, specifically here inside of Fort McPherson?
It operates like a hotel, it pays hotel motel tax, it's just,
I'm sorry, repeat that?
it pays hotel motel tax.
Do we do that, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, we should be, yes.
For any, well, here it would be like commercial or special. Out in the communities right now, are we paying hotel motel tax?
That is the way that I understand it to operate. I don't do revenue, so I can't say that whether or not revenue is collecting it. But I do know the ones that are operating in Inman Park are supposed to be paying hotel motel taxes if they operate as a bed and breakfast.
I think she's clarifying, that's different than an Airbnb tax.
No, it is not an Airbnb.
Okay, Airbnb.
Oh, so
Yeah, that's-
Airbnb is separate?
Airbnb is separate. There is legislation that is about to be proposed with regard to Airbnb, but a bed and breakfast and an Airbnb are two different uses.
Thank you, clarity, thank you.
No problem, no problem.
Thank you. Okay. Supportive housing. So let's talk about supportive housing. I know that we have supportive housing that will be on this list as required by federal law. And we've already identified places where they are. So if we could go back to that. So we've identified what the supportive housing is gonna be. And so that's on the western side, is that correct?
It's allowed.
It's allowed. Hamilton Road, and then in the heritage area. So,
The heritage area is where Bruce Gunter is planned, that everybody will see in 2 weeks at that special meeting. But we recognize that if he doesn't get his funding, we want to be able to accommodate him someplace else on the site if necessary.
so I just wanna bring this up again in terms of history, in terms of people ask. Talk about very specifically what Brian can do, the supportive housing pieces and why we have that in there and how it's required. So Brian, if you can talk about that, please.
Sure. So supportive housing is both something that we want to do and we have to do. We want to do it to meet this goal of having a place for all. But we have to do it. It's something that Congress wrote into the BRAC law, what's called the McKinney-Vento Act, where they required that a city, as part of being able to buy the property, has to have a plan for dealing with formerly homeless populations. And so the city of Atlanta and the authority worked on putting together a plan. They submitted put out an RFP and allowed different homeless services providers to come to the property and figure out where they might be able to take a building and fit in. A group of those are still with us, and it's been 11 years since that process started. So Bruce Gunter and 3 Keys, Mercy Housing, Community Advanced Practice Nurses, Hope Atlanta, all of them have been around looking to take advantage of the way this was structured, where we had to accommodate them in our plan in order for the purchase to be approved. You notice I've struggled to not say the word homeless, because too many people say homeless, homeless, homeless. There will be nobody homeless living in Fort Mac. It's kind of an oxymoron. What we're doing is building housing that accommodates the formerly homeless. And they're typically people who've had mental health issues or drug issues or drug-induced mental health issues. And so you create an environment where they are where they're supported. We have taken tours of a variety of supportive housing facilities and been impressed at their level of quality, and know that you're not going to see something that looks like Peachtree and Pine or something that people are afraid of when you think of these populations. But it was something that the federal government required of us, and we've stepped in, made a stronger commitment than what was required by the federal government, and are working with our partners to bring that to fruition here on the property.
So,
all right, Alrich has started some unknown YouTube video.
You have it in my hand.
I'm going to disavow any knowledge of this.